All right, boys and girls, this is it. This is your last lesson of the school year. I mean, we've got more work to do, but at least it's the last video you've got to watch. So this is 8.8. This is law of sines and law of cosines. So this is a review of what you've been doing, except what you've been doing says, hey, use the law of sines, or hey, use the law of cosines. This, if you cannot tell by the hot mess that is my paper right now, is a little bit of both, and you have to determine which is which. So to start off up here, it kind of gives you a key for knowing which one to use. So you use the law of sines when you have two angles in one side, or if you remember all of our abbreviations, angle, angle, side, or angle, side, angle. You also use law of sines when you're given two sides in one angle, so SSA. If you remember, when we were proving triangles congruent, that was the one thing we were not allowed to use. And you're not using it to prove things congruent, you're just using it to denote, hey, this is a shortcut, this is how I know what to use. For your law of cosines, however, this is when you're given two sides in one angle, so SAS, or if you're given all three sides, SSS. If you are given all three sides, you find the largest angle first. Otherwise, you find completely separate angles, which is interesting in its own fact. So, example number 1. And I'm going to kind of hop and bop, I think, back and forth between a separate sheet of paper. I might do it all on this. But first things first, you've got to look. So you are given, oh, hey, you were there. You're given a 7, an angle, and a 10. Well, if you look, that's a side. That is definitely an angle. That's a side. That's an SAS. SAS, we determined that was a law of cosines. So we are going to start with the law of cosines. Now, you have to determine what you're finding first. So side, side, angle, what's the side you're not given? That is side EF. There we go. So we're going to start EF squared equals, what are our other two sides? 7 squared plus 10 squared minus 2 times 7 times 10 cosine of that angle. And if you remember, this is the easy law of cosines, because then all you have to do is take the square root of that. So once you take the square root of that, that gives us that segment EF is 15.6, which, I already had filled out in the figure. Now what you have to find is and this would have been a lot easier had I remembered to grab a separate colored pencil. So you've got to find angle E and angle F. From here, you have options. I mean, you do. You can use the law of cosines and use the one where we find the angle with the law of cosines. That was kind of lengthy. Or you can use the law of sines. I went ahead and used law of sines just because I tend to think proportions are a lot easier. So sine of our given angle over the matching side, 132 over 15.6, equals sine of the angle you're trying to find, so in this case, E over the side opposite E, which was 10. So again, that was sine of 132 over 15.6 equals the sine of angle E over 10. From here, we cross multiply. So 15.6 times the sine of E has to equal 10 times the sine of 132. And that's written out right here for you. From here, you've got to get sine of E by itself. So what's the opposite of multiplying by 15.6? Dividing by 15.6. So those cancel. And you get that the sine of E equals 10 times the sine of 132 divided by 15.6. Remember though, we are looking for an angle, and anytime we are looking for the angle, we have to use the inverse trig function. So we're going to do the inverse sine of 10 times the sine of 132 divided by 15.6, and you get 28.4 degrees. So that's angle E, and we can fill that in over here. So from there, you have to find angle F. Now, again, you've got options. You can do law of cosines to find angle F. You can do law of sines to find angle F. Or you can use that common sense and the fact that we know a triangle has 180 degrees that, we've been studying since like chapter 1. And say, all right, I've got 132 and 28.4. So the measure of angle G is going to be 180 minus 132 minus 28.4. And that gave me 19.6 degrees. So these are not necessarily overly complicated. It is kind of difficult to figure out where to get started if you're not familiar with it, but once you get started, they roll pretty smoothly. My biggest point of contention is there's not a lot of space. You may want to do your work on a separate sheet of paper. So, example 2. All right, you have an angle, then an angle, then a side. Or if you went backwards, you have side, angle, angle. So come up here. Which of these goes either angle, angle, side, or side, angle, angle? So this is going to be a law of sines. Law of sines, that's where we're starting. Means find your matching angle side pair. So I'm given 129, and directly across I'm given 5. So sine of 129 over 5 equals, I'm going to go ahead and, that is not where I started. Booger. Sorry. Back that up for a second, please. Oops. Sorry. You've got 180 degrees. You've got 129. You've got 21. Go ahead and do your 180 minus 129 minus 21. And that gives you that the measure of angle N is 30 degrees. That's where I started. Sorry. So moving back to where I was saying, and it does not matter which of these laws you do first. You could set up your sine of 21 first, or you could set up your sine of 30 first. Either way, you're going to come away with the same answers. For some reason, I just, did this first and put it at the bottom like I did it last, because that's perfectly logical, Anywho, cross multiply. So LM times the sine of, and if you notice, I did not write out my work on this. Oops. I have spare paper somewhere in my house. All right, so taking that, and cross multiplying it, and I'm going to move it over here, you get LM times the sine of 129 equals 5 times the sine of 30. From here, if you want to get LM by itself, you've got to move this sine of 129. The opposite of multiplying is dividing, so we're going to divide by the sine of 129. These cancel, so you get LM equals 5 times the sine of 30 divided by the sine of 129. And you end up getting 3.2. So this one, I did the same thing. I cross-multiplied and divided. I'm not going to rewrite it out for you because you follow the same steps that we did here. And you end up getting 2.3 for MN. So, number 3. Sorry. All right. You've got, let's see, we've got an angle, side, side. Well, that's ASS. Remember, no bad words in math class. So we come back up here. Hey, it's not listed as ASS, it's listed as SSA. So again, this is a law of sines. So we come back down here, and going off the fact that okay, never mind, scratch that. You are given 98. What side is directly across from 98? 28. So sine of 98 over 28 equals, what is the only other piece of information you're given? 17. So we're going to put 17 on the bottom and the angle directly across from that on top. So sine of 98 over 28 equals the sine of angle X over 17. And I will go ahead and write out that proportion for you. Lucy, stop. Sorry, the dog is pouting because she's not outside with my daughters. She whines. So again, I'm going to do this cross multiplication on a separate sheet of paper. You get 28 times the sine of X equals 17 times the sine of 98. From here, we need to get the sine of X by itself. So what's the opposite of multiplying by 28? Dividing by 28. You get the sine of X equals 17 times the sine of 98 divided by 28. If you're looking for an angle, and we are, remember you have to use the inverse trig function. So inverse sine of 17 times the sine of 98 divided by 28. And that is where this lovely pretty 37 came from. So once you have that X is 37 degrees, well then I can say, all right, a triangle has 180. So 180 minus 98 minus 37 gives me 45 degrees down here for W, which that work is right here. So W is 45. And then I have to find XY because I am still missing this. Now, again, you have options. Once you get the ball rolling, you almost always have options. I want a side, particularly I want this side. Me, personally, for the most part, if I'm trying to find a side, I think cosines is easier. If I'm trying to find an angle, I think sines is easier. But it is completely up to you, personal preference. If you do the law of sines, you're going to get the same answer. But I set up, all right, xy squared equals, what are my other two sides? 17 squared plus 28 squared minus 2 times 17 times 28 times the cosine of that angle, 45. So it is set up here. If you set it up using the law of sines, which again, you would do sine of 98 over 28 equals the sine of 45 over xy. And you would just cross multiply and divide, and you're still going to get 20, guys. So again, once you get this piece, typically the rest of it is kind of up to your personal preference. So example 4. You have side, side, side. Flat out, you have 3 sides. So law of sines means you have to have at least one angle, and you got bogus. No angles, which means automatically you're dealing with cosines. Now, if you remember, the note on the front page said you find the largest angle first. And if you remember way back in chapter 5, pretty sure it's 5, the largest angle is directly across from the largest side. So which is the largest side? 29. That means B is our largest angle. So we're going to find B first. So set up your law of cosines. 29 squared equals, what are my other two sides? 24 squared plus 14 squared minus 2 times 24 times 14 cosine B. That's written out for you right here. And if you remember when I do mine, that 69 comes from doing 29 squared minus 24 squared minus 14 squared. And this negative 672 comes from 2 times 24 times 14. Sorry, if you hear the oven, it's pepperoni rolls and they're not done yet. So the timer is going to be going off for the next foreseeable future. I apologize. Anywho, you get 69 equals negative 672 cosine of B. We need to get that negative 672 to the other side, so we divide by it. And if we want to find an angle, we use the inverse. So the inverse cosine of 69 over 672 is 95.9. And if you need practice with that, go back and watch my notes on this. I'm making a ton of these notes, and hardly any of you are watching it. It's mind-boggling. So, once you've found that angle, then you can find either A or C. I would go ahead and find C, though, because that's your next largest. So I would move from finding this one, which we just did, to finding this one. And again, me personally, I think law of sines is easier, so I've switched over to using the law of sines. I set up sine of 95.9 over 29 equals sine of C over 24. I cross multiplied. I used my inverse trig function to get that the measure of angle C was 55.4. And then from there, I can use my knowledge that a triangle is 180 degrees and take 180 minus 95.9 minus 55.4 to get this 28.7 degrees up here in the corner. Example 5. All right, we are given angle, side, angle. Angle, side, angle, if you refer back to the front, that's your law of sines. So the first thing you need to do is find your side angle pair. Well, you're only given that side, which means we need that angle. To find that angle, I'm going to use my triangle knowledge. 180 minus 80 minus 62. See that work? Yeah. That gives you 38 degrees. So we, fill that in over here in the box. So sine of 38 over 6 equals, pick one of them, sine of 80 over SR. Do your cross multiplication and your division, and you get 9.6. And then you're going to run almost the identical one with 62 instead of 80, and you get 8.6. So these should be coming extremely repetitive for you, by the way. These ones, however, not so much. You got to draw these. So number 6. Do you see how it says draw a picture? Use your artistic abilities. Draw the stinking picture, children. So a wire 30 inches long is bent into a triangle with sides measuring 6 inches, 11 inches, and 13 inches. Find the measure of the largest angle in the triangle. So 30 inches, we've got a 6, an 11, and a 13. You want to find the largest angle. Largest angle is across from the largest side. So largest side is 13, womp, directly across. X is my largest angle. So if I've got a side, side, side triangle, I'm going to use law of cosines. So 13 squared equals, what are my other two? 6 squared plus 11 squared minus 2 times 11 times 6 cosine of x. See that pretty equation? Yeah. Remember, the 12 comes from doing 13 squared minus 11 squared minus 6 squared. The negative 132 comes from doing negative 2 times 11 times 6. We need to move this to the other side, so we divide. We need to find the angle, so we have to use the inverse trig function. And then we plug that into the calculator, and we get a whopping 95.2 degrees. Now, number 7, Tia and Braden are standing 12 feet apart from each other on opposite sides of an in-ground swimming pool. They spot a pair of goggles on the pool floor between them. The angle of depression from Tia and Braden to the goggles is 65 degrees and 28 degrees respectively. Find the direct distance from Tia to the goggles. So, Tia and Braden are 12 feet apart. Tia's angle of depression, which is line of sight down, is 65 degrees. Sorry, goggles are here. Braden's angle of depression from eye level down, 28 degrees. We want to find direct distance from Tia to the goggles. So Tia to goggles, that's x. So currently we have angle, side, angle. That is a law of sines. So set up the angle side pair you've got, which if you look, you don't have one of those. You've got a side. The only side is 12, so we need that angle. Hey, I hope if you could see. I've got 65 here and 28 here. So I'm going to do 180 minus 65 minus 28 to get the angle G is 87 degrees. And then I'm just going to set it up. Sine of 87 over 12 equals, I need this right here. So go directly across. Sine of 28 over x. I do my cross multiplication and division, and I get that the distance from Tia to the goggles is 5.6 feet. I'm sorry if you heard that squeal. I don't know if they're playing robots on the trampoline or what, but you know, they're something. All right. Starting from the same port, Ship A and Ship B sailed apart with a 30-degree angle between them. Ship A sailed 5 miles and Ship B sailed 8 miles. Find the distance between the two ships. So, port here. Ship A went 5 miles. At a 30-degree angle, Ship B went 8 miles. Find the distance between Ship A and Ship B. So x is right here. That is a side angle side, which means I'm using cosines. So x squared equals, what are my other two sides? 5 squared plus 8 squared minus 2 times 5 times 8 times cosine of 30. Good Lord, between them screaming and the oven beeping, I'm about to lose my mind. So, anywho, you fill all that out. Because you're just finding a side, you take the square root, which is nice and easy, and you get that those ships are 4.4 miles apart. So again, if there's a specific part, like the cross multiplying that you're struggling with, go back and watch the old videos. Or if you're struggling with how to solve the law of cosines, go back and watch the video. But if you are struggling with knowing how to set them up, like which one do I start with? That's when you send me a text or a message or something that says, hey, help me please. Let me know how it goes, guys. Bye.